Oh, honey, didn't you check your bag? You don't have a ticket anymore. That was the last thing my mother said to me before she boarded the plane home, leaving me stranded at the gate in Paris. She scanned 3 boarding passes, hers, my father's, and my sister Beatrice's. Mine was gone. I tried to grab her arm, but Beatrice shoved me hard, slipping a black passport into my open tote bag. Seconds later, the security alarms screamed. Armed French police swarmed me, shouting commands I didn't understand. I looked back at the gate, begging for help. My family wasn't panicking. They weren't crying. They were walking down the jet bridge, leaving me to be arrested in a foreign country with a stolen passport in my bag. Before I tell you what they planned to do with my inheritance while I was locked in a foreign cell, drop a comment. Where are you watching from? And what time is it for you right now? I sat in a glass-walled detention room that smelled like industrial cleaner and stale coffee. Most people would be crying. Most people would be screaming for a lawyer or begging the stone-faced guard for a phone call. But I didn't cry. I calculated. I'm a forensic accountant. My job is to look at a mess of numbers and find the story they're trying to hide. So I looked at my situation like a balance sheet. Item 1. My mother took my real passport. Item 2. My sister planted a stolen passport in my bag. Item 3. This specific passport was reported lost yesterday, which meant a mandatory 48-hour identity hold while French authorities verified who I was. Why 48 hours? Then it clicked. The realization hit me harder than the cold metal chair I was sitting on. My grandmother's trust fund. $2,500,000. It was set to mature tomorrow at noon. There was a specific clause in the fine print, the absentee clause. If the primary beneficiary couldn't be located or contacted within 24 hours of the maturity date, administrative control temporarily reverted to the next of kin. My parents. They didn't just want to ruin my vacation. They needed me to vanish for exactly 2 days so they could legally steal $2.5 million. It was brilliant. It was evil. And I was trapped in a glass box while they were probably ordering champagne in first class. The door buzzed open. I expected a detective. Instead, a man walked in who looked like he owned the airport. He wore a charcoal suit that cost more than my car, and he moved with the kind of predatory grace you usually see in sharks or investment bankers. He didn't sit. He stood by the door, studying me like I was a column of figures he couldn't quite get to add up. Ellie Miller, he said. His voice was low, devoid of sympathy. Top of your class at Wharton. Specialized in forensic audits for distressed assets. You have a reputation for finding money that doesn't want to be found. I straightened my spine. Who are you? Sebastian. I run a venture capital firm in New York. We have a mutual problem. My problem is a stolen passport and a family that framed me, I said. What's yours? My problem is a merger happening in 3 days. I have a partner who is skimming off the top, but he's good. Too good. My regular auditors can't find the leak. He checked his watch. I need someone who isn't on the payroll. Someone desperate enough to work fast and quiet. He tossed a file onto the metal table. It wasn't my police file. It was a contract. I have friends at the embassy. I can have you walked out of here in 20 minutes as a diplomatic consultant. You get on my jet, you fly back to New York, you find my missing money. And in return? I asked. In return, you get your freedom. You get back to New York before your trust fund deadline passes. And I pay you $20,000 for the job. I looked at him. This wasn't a rescue mission. He didn't care about my feelings or my family trauma. He saw a resource he could exploit. It was the most honest offer I'd received in years. Make it $30,000, I said. And you cover my legal fees if my family tries to contest the will. Sebastian smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a man who just closed a profitable deal. Done. I stood up. I didn't look back at the guard or the glass box. I walked out of that room. Not as a victim, but as a partner. My family thought they had discarded me. They didn't realize they had just pushed me into the big leagues. The cabin of Sebastian's private jet was quieter than a library and colder than a morgue. He sat across from me, reviewing a merger agreement, while I stared at the dossier his team had compiled on my family. It was impressive. In less than an hour, they had pulled bank records, emails, and the full text of my grandmother's trust. I flipped to page 4. There it was, the absentee clause. In the event the primary beneficiary cannot be located or is deemed legally incapacitated 48 hours prior to disbursement, administrative power transfers to the secondary guardians. My parents. They didn't just want the money. They wanted the power to spend it without oversight. I looked out the window at the Atlantic Ocean below. I should have been heartbroken. I should have been mourning the loss of the family I thought I had. But as I read the legal fine print, the sadness evaporated. In its place, a cold, hard rage began to settle in my chest. Because this wasn't the first time. The memories hit me like physical blows. Not vague feelings of neglect, but specific, itemized receipts of every time I had bankrolled their dysfunction. I remembered being 22. I had just bought my first car, a used Honda Civic. I was so proud of it. 2 days later, my father, Walter, sat me down at the kitchen table. He wasn't angry. He was pathetic. He was crying. He owed $30,000 to a bookie who was threatening to break his legs. "You're the responsible one, Ellie," he had said. "You can fix this. You always fix this." I sold the car the next morning. I wired the money to the bookie. My father didn't thank me. He didn't apologize. He just asked me for a ride to the track the next weekend. I turned the page of the dossier. I remembered the scholarship to Wharton. It was a full ride. My ticket out. But Beatrice had just gone through a bad breakup. My mother insisted she needed a mental health year in Italy to recover. They couldn't afford it unless— "Ellie, you can just take out loans," my mother had said, her voice reasonable, as if asking me to pass the salt. "Beatrice is fragile. She needs this experience. You're strong. You can handle the debt." I gave up the scholarship money so my sister could eat gelato in Florence while I worked the graveyard shift at a data center to pay tuition. For years, I told myself this was love. I told myself that being the strong one was a compliment. I was wrong. I looked at Sebastian, who was watching me over the rim of his espresso cup. "You realize what you are to them, don't you?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I said. "I'm not a daughter. I'm an insurance policy." They had spent 29 years training me to be competent. Not so I could succeed, but so I could clean up their messes. They groomed me to be the perfect fixer, the reliable safety net. And now that the big payout was coming, they were cashing me out. They thought they had broken me at that airport. They thought stripping me of my passport and my phone would leave me helpless. But they forgot one thing. They were the ones who taught me how to survive without resources. They were the ones who forced me to become a shark just to keep my head above water. I reached into my bag and pulled out the laptop Sebastian had provided. "What are you doing?" he asked. I opened a blank document. "I'm drafting an incorporation agreement for a shell company," I said, my fingers flying across the keys. "They want a quick payout? I'm going to give them an opportunity they can't refuse." "You're going to trap them," Sebastian stated. It wasn't a question. "They trained me to fix their messes," I said, staring at the cursor blinking on the white screen. "Now, I'm going to fix them permanently." We landed at Teterboro just as the sun was bleeding over the New York skyline. Sebastian's driver was waiting on the tarmac. No customs lines, no questions. Money doesn't just buy things, it buys shortcuts. 30 minutes later, I was sitting in the war room of Sebastian's penthouse in Tribeca. It was a fortress of glass and steel, completely detached from the mess my life had become. "My security team has set up a mirror of your cloud accounts," Sebastian said, sliding a tablet across the mahogany table. "You might want to brace yourself." I didn't brace. I tapped the screen. I was technically free. But digitally, I was already dead. Beatrice had been busy. The first thing I saw was her Instagram story, posted 6 hours ago. It was a selfie of her looking teary-eyed in the airport lounge, captioning a black screen. "Please pray for my sister Ellie. She had a severe mental breakdown at the airport in Paris. We are doing everything we can to get her professional help. Please respect our privacy during this crisis." It was a masterclass in character assassination. By framing it as a mental health crisis, she wasn't just explaining my absence. She was discrediting any accusation I might make later. If I screamed fraud, she would just nod sadly and say, "See, she's paranoid." But that was just the social media smokescreen. The real damage was in my email. My mother, Sylvia, had sent an urgent priority message to the trust executor. Subject: Emergency guardianship. Disbursement of funds. Attached was a scanned document. A police incident report from Charles de Gaulle Airport, citing me for a security breach and erratic behavior. "As you can see," my mother wrote, "Eleanor is currently incarcerated and mentally unfit to manage her affairs. Per the absentee clause, we are invoking our right as secondary guardians to secure the assets before she causes further harm to herself." They weren't just stealing the money. They were nuking my professional reputation to do it. A forensic accountant labeled mentally unstable and incarcerated is unemployable. They were making sure that even if I got out, I would have nothing left to go back to. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Not fear. Clarity. They truly believed I was helpless. They thought I was sitting in a French cell, crying into my hands, waiting for them to save me. They had no idea I was sitting in a penthouse in Tribeca, watching their every move in high definition. "They're thorough," Sebastian noted, reading over my shoulder. "They've effectively blocked you from contesting the transfer without a lengthy legal battle. By the time a judge hears you, the money will be gone." "They don't want a legal battle," I said, my eyes fixed on the screen. They want a quick payout. They have debts. Real debts. The kind you can't pay with a payment plan. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. Down below, the city was waking up. Somewhere in this city, my parents were probably celebrating. They were counting chickens that hadn't hatched yet. They think the only way to get the money is through the trust executor, I said. They're thinking small. I turned back to Sebastian. I need access to your capital reserves. Not to spend. Just to show. Sebastian raised an eyebrow. What's the play? I'm going to become the answer to their prayers, I said. They need cash fast? I'm going to offer them a deal so good, they'll sign their own death warrants just to touch it. It took less than an hour to build the cage. Using Sebastian's infrastructure, we created Atlas Holdings, a boutique investment firm specializing in distressed asset acquisition. It had a sleek website, a Delaware registration, and a verifiable proof of funds showing $50 million in liquid capital. It looked like salvation. It was actually a guillotine. My parents are drowning, I told Sebastian, pulling up their credit report on the main screen. They have 3 mortgages, maxed out credit cards, and if my father's gambling habits haven't changed, he owes money to people who don't send late notices. So we offer them a lifeline, Sebastian said. We offer them a bridge loan, I corrected. High interest, short term, immediate payout. We offer to buy out their bad debt for pennies on the dollar. But we need collateral. The trust fund. Sebastian finished. Exactly. But since the trust is technically in my name, Atlas Holdings can't accept it as collateral unless the current guardians swear under oath that the primary beneficiary is incapacitated, Sebastian said, a shark-like grin spreading across his face. Perjury, I said. Wire fraud, bank fraud, the trifecta. We didn't make the call ourselves. Sebastian brought in Marcus, a corporate attorney who specialized in hostile takeovers. Marcus had a voice like gravel wrapped in silk. He sounded exactly like the kind of man who made problems disappear for a price. We sat in the war room, listening on speakerphone as Marcus dialed my father's number. It rang twice. Hello? Walter's voice was tight, anxious. He was probably expecting a debt collector. Mr. Miller? This is Marcus Thorne representing Atlas Holdings. We've acquired a portfolio of distressed liabilities that includes your outstanding notes. We are looking to liquidate these positions immediately. I watched the audio waveform on the screen. My father was silent. He was terrified. I don't have the liquidity right now, Walter stammered. We're waiting on a family trust disbursement. But there are administrative delays. Delays make my partners nervous, Mr. Miller, Marcus said, his tone bored and impatient. However, Atlas is willing to consolidate your debt into a single bridge loan secured against the trust. We can wire the funds this afternoon, but we need to close the file today. Today? Walter's voice cracked. Yes, we can do today. Excellent. There is one compliance issue. Our due diligence shows the trust is in your daughter's name. For us to accept it as collateral, we need legal assurance that you have sole administrative authority to encumber the assets. I held my breath. This was the moment. My daughter is unavailable, Walter said quickly. She had a mental break. She's in custody abroad. We have emergency powers. I see, Marcus said. Standard procedure in these cases requires an affidavit of sole authority. You'll need to sign a sworn statement confirming her incapacity and your exclusive right to the funds. It carries the weight of a court order. Can you execute that document? Yes, Walter said. No hesitation. No guilt. Just greed. We can sign it immediately. Good. Meet me at our satellite office in Midtown in 2 hours. Bring the paperwork. We'll have the check ready. Marcus hung up. The room was silent. I looked at the screen, at the disconnect notification. My father hadn't just agreed to a loan. He had just agreed to commit a federal felony to steal my money. He didn't care if I was sick. He didn't care if I was in jail. He just wanted the check. Sebastian slid a folder toward me. The affidavit is airtight, he said. Once they sign, it's a confession. I took the pen. My hand was steady. Let's go, I said. I don't want to be late for my own funeral. From behind one-way glass, I watched my family celebrate around the check on the table. Champagne flowed. Beatrice snapped selfies. My father whispered about loan sharks and deadlines. My mother reassured him they just needed signatures. They weren't stealing from me, they believed they were saving me. It's time, I said. I walked into the room. Silence fell. My mother dropped her glass. My father went pale. You haven't signed yet, I noted, picking up the affidavit. You were about to commit perjury, I said calmly. Sign it, Dad. 5 to 10 years in federal prison. I dare you. He froze. The trap had sprung. Then Beatrice smiled. She held up my stolen phone. I accessed your firm's server, she said. Downloaded your top clients' files. An email to the ethics board goes out in 10 minutes. Your career or your inheritance. Choose. I opened my laptop. That passcode wasn't a mistake, I said. It was bait. The wall monitor lit up security logs, locations, timestamps. My phone had been in French police custody when the breach occurred. You committed international cyber fraud using a stolen device, I said. That triggers an automatic FBI alert. Her face collapsed. A man in the corner stood the loan's proxy lawyer. He stamped the affidavit. I'm a court-appointed notary and mandatory fraud reporter, he said. That signature makes this perjury and wire fraud. Sebastian checked his watch. The detectives have been listening next door. 2 plainclothes officers entered. Beatrice dropped the phone. My parents panicked. You wanted my career or my inheritance, I said quietly. You lose both. Handcuffs clicked. No shouting, just consequences. 3 weeks later, I signed the final document in my new corner office. Sebastian and I dissolved our contract. No drama, just respect. I booked a one-way first-class ticket to Paris. They said family is everything. They were wrong. Freedom is.